Hey everybody, my name is Robert Kinsler,
My name's TJR.
and we're actually here, kind of a sad occasion. We're going to talk a little bit about the legacy of Ric Ocasek, who passed away yesterday, which was on Sunday, September 15th, and we now know it looks like it was related to cardiovascular disease or something like that. Very sad, and
Not uncommon at that age.
not uncommon, yeah. And I've read reports. Some reports said he was age 70. Some said he was 75. But regardless, I mean, he was the leader of the Cars and a seminal singer, songwriter, guitar player, and also a very well-known producer as well.
Became a very good, very well-known record producer. Worked on a number of really good albums. And I had read he was 75.
Yeah. I had read that initially too, and then they said there were some other reports. But regardless, I mean, his legacy is large, whether he was 70 or he was 75. You know, just a great loss for the musical world. And I know we were talking a little bit off camera too, TJ, that, you know, increasingly it seems like we're seeing some of these greats from the 60s and 70s kind of pass on. We had no longer... You know, we had no sooner lost Eddie Money, and then Ric Ocasek, you know, passes away. Just very sad.
Yes. This is going to be just more frequent now.
Yeah.
Where it's reaching that point where a lot of these musical legends from the 60s, from the 70s, and even some from the 80s.
Yeah.
And in fact, I would say the Cars kind of they began to have their first big breakthrough during the late 70s.
Right.
Which, when we think of the New Wave period, which was the period where they were kind of considered part of that New Wave crowd.
Right, they were one of the groundbreaking early entries into kind of like that New Wave, kind of that new alternative rock.
Yeah.
You know, along with the Police, along with the Pretenders and Talking Heads.
And that began in the late 70s, actually. People tend to think, it all started in the 80s.
Right.
But that began in the late 70s, but then really began to carry on into the 80s.
It did.
That's kind of the time frame. And I remember the first Cars album coming out when I was still in high school, which was the 70s.
Right.
And I remember that being very big. And
I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I mean, when I heard the first Cars album, and it came out in 1978, I had never heard anything like it. I mean, that it had kind of the cool guitars and the cool riffs and stuff and really great songwriting, but it also had that really creative use of synthesizers, and they didn't try to pretend it was a piano. I mean, it was a synthesizer generally, and they really were cutting edge for their time, you know, when that first album came out.
I remember that they were a crossover band when it came to radio.
They surely were.
You had, of course, stations that were the mainstays of what we called FM rock. And this was mainly the stations that were playing the great bands of the 60s and 70s, you know, which would be the present day.
Right.
This was when classic rock was not classic, when it was current rock. But then when that revolution began with punk and New Wave, what they were starting to call New Wave, the Cars were one of those bands that could get on the radio with the FM rock stations that were playing Led Zeppelin, you know, that type of thing. And they would get on those radio stations like KMET, a big station during the late 70s, but now defunct, KLOS, now a classic rock station, no longer playing really new music anymore, but at the time they did. But they could also get on the early beginning, what we called the new rock stations, the new wave stations like K-Rock. K-Rock Q still around to this day. They managed to cross over into both, which was unique.
And it was, I was just going to say, that was a pretty tough accomplishment to get then. And that's what I mean, some bands I think like that came after, like U2 or the Smithereens. You had a few of these bands that you're right, they could get on K-Rock or 91X and they could get on KLOS, but they rarely, you didn't hear the same band on same station. The Cars were one of the first bands I remember that was able to do that. And you know, it's because they had this kind of contemporary, current and groundbreaking sound, but like I said, there was still elements in their music that kind of tied back with some of their influences, you know. And just a great band, and it was so nice that they did get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with Ric Ocasek at the helm just last year. So I'm glad they did get in, because some bands have had to wait, but it was nice that they got to get in there with him at the helm as well.
Before his passing.
Yeah.
And I remember you asking me, what did I think of it? I remember, of course, hearing the hits, You're Just What I Needed.
Right.
Of course, that was, I think, the first big
Yeah,
hit.
yeah.
And I think one of the reasons why they crossed over was kind of like what you said. There was that new wave sound that was more synthesizer driven, but they also had that sound that was more guitar driven, more electric guitar driven, with the the overdriven guitars that was more a part of the FM rock of the time. So I think it was that combination that kind of helped them cross over. But I remember when I heard that, there was this kind of like, with a song like You're Just What I Needed.
Yeah.
Songs, and then songs like on the follow-up album, like Candio, where there was this kind of robotic, mechanical, like Devo-esque sound. There was almost a kind of maniacal attitude to that. But then there was, of course, this wonderful, all these wonderful catchy pop hooks that were reminiscent, going all the way back to rock and roll from even the 50s that were combined in with that. So there's a lot of influences from the past that Ric Ocasek, who pretty much, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, wrote pretty much all their songs.
Yeah, he wrote most of them. Him and Benjamin Orr shared lead vocals.
Yeah.
But I think, as far as I know, Ric Ocasek did the majority of the songwriting, and I think people kind of see him as kind of the artistic leader of the band too, as well.
Yeah, from everything I've read, he was.
Yeah, yeah.
I think some band members described it as a benevolent dictatorship.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, he steered the ship, and that's fine. But yeah, he would write the songs, and but there you could definitely hear him pulling from a lot of his influences from the past, but keeping his ear to the ground to what was contemporary at the time.
Right.
And whether that was deliberate or that's just, hey, this just happened. He heard this new stuff and started catching on to it, the new stuff that was happening with punk and new wave. I don't know, but it worked, and none of it felt forced.
Yeah.
It all felt natural.
Yeah.
Which is why it worked, why people caught on to it.
Yeah, sure did. Sure did.
None of it self-calculated.
Yeah. Now, something I think really interesting for those that maybe have forgotten, or maybe they're not that aware of the Cars' legacy, is, that first album was tremendously huge, and they had other hits, but that first album is generally recognized as one of the great debuts of all time. But then the Cars had kind of their first resurgence back in, I think it was 1984, when Heartbeat City came out. And that was also around the time of the rise of MTV, and the two kind of went hand in hand. And then you saw how effectively the Cars used video, because I know we talked about their sound was groundbreaking, but it was also new. But then they were able to catch another wave kind of with the videos.
Yeah, they had some very cool videos. I'm trying to think of the song right now.
It's
Magic.
Yeah, and Magic. It's just called Magic. Magic, and you might think those are pretty cool videos.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that were big at the time. And I think that gave the band kind of this other push.
Second win.
Yeah. So, and you think about it, and especially that song Drive that was on that album, and it was so uncharacteristically Cars, but it shows you how then too that the Cars, to me, harken back to some of the great bands like you mentioned from the classic rock era, because they were willing to go outside of their signature sound and do other things, And
that was Benjamin Orr singing vocals.
That was, yeah.
And he had more of that kind of natural, that kind of singing voice that fit in more with what came prior.
Right, exactly.
With groups like Journey.
Right.
That would be big on the FM rock radio,
Right.
whereas Ric Ocasek's voice had that, he had that deeper bass voice. And also he would sometimes deliberately sing in this kind of like I said, robotic.
Right. Almost like a compressed, hiccupy,
and when I say robotic, I don't want to have it come off the wrong way. He was never auto-tuned.
Yeah.
He was never quantized, but it was a deliberate thing where he had this kind of, and I can't imitate the voice. I wish I could try to sing it right now. But there was this like almost, the only way I can describe it is kind of maniacal, robotic flavor to it. He sometimes sounded like an evil robot, in my opinion. And when I'd hear him sing, especially when he would sing about things like on Just What I Needed, there's kind of using that voice would add so much more obsession to how he sang his desire for the girl he was singing about,
right,
to almost obsessive levels, And when you're a teenager, at least when I was a teenager, you can identify with that really strongly, because you see a girl that you're crazy about, and it just becomes all you can think about 24/7. And hearing that song just kind of sums it up, especially the way he sings it, I kind of lose my mind, mind, he's half speaking it, but it's being done so effectively. So there was this, I call it this kind of maniacal robotic tone that he used.
Now, and I want to say that with Just What I Needed, and when you're young, I think that may have been Ben Orr singing that one.
Really?
Even though it sounds like Ric Ocasek, but I maybe the readers will have to go back and check.
Hey everybody, it's me from the future. I looked that up. It was Ben Orr. Robert was correct. Sorry about that. My bad. Let's move on.
But when you look at some of those recordings, I think that they were both borrowing from each other, because they had been performing together in other bands, and they had met, I want to say, back in the 60s. And they were friends many years, and I think that they influenced each other on their styles. But no, I agree with what you're saying. And, one thing that I also find interesting about the Cars, as great as they were and as successful as they were, you didn't hear a lot of bands try to really copy them. So I think over time, you really do have an appreciation. It's like the Doors. They were very successful, but you didn't have other Doors imitators really coming along too often.
At least none that we remember.
Yeah, not that we remember. And I think that's a sign. I mean, there was a lot of bands that wanted to be the Beatles, but with the Cars, they kind of had their own little universe happening, and you got to give them a lot of credit for that and how they endured. So what maybe a couple other thoughts maybe to add is, despite their success in '84 with Heartbeat City, the band did break up in '88, and it didn't look very likely like they were going to get back together because Ric Ocasek was so successful as a producer. A lot of people even forget that he produced probably Weezer's two greatest albums, the Green Album and the Blue Album. He produced, I think, for Hole, No Doubt, Black 47, the famous New York Irish band, and even Bad Religion. So that kind of eclectic attitude he brought to his music, he also brought to his production projects as well. Just a great, and I think it's hard to make the leap from being a great, iconic frontman in a band and then be equally successful as a producer.
Not everybody can do that.
Yeah. I mean, Todd Rundgren comes to mind, but not a lot of people come to mind in terms of that. I did bring a few things to show the folks out there, in case you're not familiar with the Cars. This is their first album, the one we talked a lot about, came out in 1978.
Yeah.
And it's self-titled, great album. And their last album, they did have a reunion album with the four surviving members of the Cars at that time, including Ric Ocasek. And this is an album, and it's called Move Like This, kind of a play on word, because the Cars were known for not being very active on stage. They kind of, like you use the word robotic, they were pretty still. So, all these are great. All the Cars albums I would recommend, and I think Ric Ocasek, great songwriter, and the Cars were a great band.
And of course, he also had a solo career too.
He did.
Yeah. Probably not as successful as with the Cars.
Right.
Maybe not as many hits, but he did manage to score some hits as a solo artist.
He did.
And the music that he did solo, of course, since he was writing most of the songs, it's no surprise that a lot of it sounded like a continuation of the Cars.
That's right, exactly.
A lot of it seemed to pick up where he left off with the Cars. I know that the band broke up because, there were a lot of personal issues. I'm not going to get into that here.
Yeah.
But there were definitely personal issues. And I think I read a quote once where he said something along the lines of that it stopped being fun to be in the Cars. It stopped being fun to tour.
Yeah.
And that's when it kind of came time to call it quits, at least for a while.
Yeah.
I'm glad they managed to get back together. It's just too bad, Benjamin Orr was by that time had passed away.
Yeah, and they did a nice dedication to him on the album, and it's
good.
And it is sad, when but I think it like we said, it's happening, far too often.
Yeah, well.
But occasions like this are good chances to kind of rediscover and celebrate the music.
Yeah.
Because even though we've lost these great artists, at least their music lives on, and that's a great thing.
Absolutely. I think we're both kind of lost for words at this point.
Yeah.
Here's a fun question. Is there a favorite Cars song you'd like to bring up?
Boy, I love so many, but I'd probably say Moving in Stereo.
Oh, you dog, you. That was going to be mine.
Oh, shoot.
Well, but I have a follow-up.
Okay.
I have a follow-up. Moving in Stereo. To me, that is so quintessential Cars. And once again, it's got that, I wish I could have like living in stereo. There's that kind of like
diabolical, right?
It's very diabolical sounding. I don't know if the lyrics are diabolical, but it sure sounds diabolical, and it's got that great synth part. Bum bum. Bum ba da ba da. Very awesome. Mysterious, as if you're up to something that's no good. I love the sound of it. We just don't hear music like that anymore.
No, you don't. You don't.
But a second song for me would be Candio.
Oh yeah,
the title track, which didn't get a lot of radio airplay.
I don't think it did. I mean, a little bit, but not a lot that I recall.
It's one of those songs that leaves you wanting more. It's way too short. Once again, it's got. And like I said, it's very quintessential Cars. It's got those heavy guitars, really like grinding, powerful guitars. But then it's got that synth part, and it's very, it's unlike, say, it reminds me a little bit of the synth section from Baba O'Reilly. But whereas that has this very kind of open, breathy feel to it, the synth part in there, which is very similar, has this kind of like, once again, that kind of like cold, mechanical, but it's not cold. It's not mechanical, but it emotionally feels cold and mechanical, and once again, ominous. Yeah. And also, it's got that killer guitar solo.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It starts with first just that that like, us doing a 2-fingered chord and ending it on a note. And then it breaks into this killer little solo, very compact, but very effective. Yeah. Sorry, can't hum it. But you know what part I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And the Cars did that. I mean, they had these great, like you said, they weren't overindulgent. The moods were right. The songwriting, the choruses were right. The vote. I mean, they're and I think we both nailed. I mean, you go back and listen. You say it's a great, body of work. Great song. So many great songs.
And that song is the perfect example as to why they appealed to both the earlier FM rock crowd and the later new wave rock crowd, because they were embracing both. You had those killer guitar solos that was part of what came before, and you had this synth-driven music, which was the new thing. Yeah, perfect example of that.
Exactly.
Why they crossed over in the way that they did.
Yeah.
And because there was a lot of when that scene happened, there was a lot of division.
Oh, definitely.
You were either part of the FM rock crowd, or you were part of this new music rock crowd,
or you were a punk rocker and you weren't part of anybody.
Yeah, and there was like this, like, we don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
I remember that there was this real division, which I never understood because rock and roll music is rock and roll music, pop and rock music. It's all just music. It all comes from the same picking building blocks of music. Exactly. What's the problem here? Yeah. But we really, for a while there, got really segregated in a really bad way musically. And I know this is a totally different topic. Yeah. And I guess if we're going to end this on one thing, the Cars found a way to bring both sides together.
They certainly did.
Anyway, so I guess if we have to end this video, that's a real positive place to end it right there.
Yeah. And very sad when one of our heroes passes on, but at least in the case of Ric Ocasek, boy, I just recall when I was on Twitter yesterday, all the accolades, all the heartfelt wishes. I mean, God, Peter Frampton, Pete Yorn, Weezer, obviously, because he produced some of their greatest albums. But so many people
saw one from Slash.
Yeah, so many. Across the musical landscape, you saw this, really heartfelt, kind of attention and kind of remembering, what a great artist that Ric Ocasek was. Yeah. But I hope everyone out there will maybe leave their thoughts too.
Yes. Please share with us your thoughts. Tell us what your favorite Cars song was. What was your favorite Cars album, or Ric Ocasek's solo song or album? And tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about your experiences, your history with it, how you remember it, and share your thoughts with us. We'd all look forward to reading that. And everybody, just thank you for watching, and just. Rest in peace. Yeah. Ric Ocasek, rest in peace. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.